السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Today we have another guest to the podcast, and this is my husband. Welcome to the podcast. There were a couple of requests to hear about homeschooling from the co-parenting perspective. So here we are, me and you, to talk about how this homeschooling journey has been. So tell us more about you or what you'd like to share about your perspective as a homeschooling dad.
Well, the idea of homeschooling was actually brought by you. I was not
So
familiar
you
with
didn't
it.
know about homeschooling before?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I've not met, I did not meet homeschoolers before that. I heard of the idea. I read about it. Well, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't met any homeschoolers either in real life, when I first had the
no,
idea.
but
Do you
I
remember us
lived.
talking about it? Like, do you remember what was the first memory
Yeah,
that
we talked
we talked
about it.
about it?
We talked about before marriage.
Yeah, so we kind of had this idea
But
about
I lived in
homeschooling.
the place that homeschooling was acceptable,
Okay.
right? So we lived, we moved to Canada back in 1996, and we met 3 years later. But I mean, in Canada and US, which was close by, I've heard of it a lot. I've seen reports. Internet wise, maybe I've come across some few articles, but it was not a novel thing that I was like, oh, what is that? It was more like, okay, I've heard of it. Let's talk about it. What is it about, and so on. That
So
was
how did you feel like when we actually decided, like when I was talking about not sending them to school, like how did that feel?
Well, we talked about it, right? And then I was like, wow, that sounds nice. That's a good idea. Why not? Let's think about it. The concern was always, how do we deal with school when it comes to children, and the environment and stuff like that, living in a non-Muslim country, and being exposed to things you don't want them to be exposed to, even though there was Islamic schools present. But with that being said, the Islamic schools were kind of in the beginning, they started and they were not that of a high quality, and there were some issues with them, so you were worried about that.
So they were religious concerns, right? Like, obviously, how do you, educate a child in a Muslim environment? But I think my concerns were more of like, school as an institution in general. Like, I didn't think school was that great.
Yes, but my concern was like from the, like I said, religious side, which was like, how do we reconcile between the two? What do we do? I mean, that was I was open to that, in the beginning. So let's talk about it at that time. And then when you presented the idea, the unschooling, some of the ideas that I was not aware of, like unschooling, the homeschooling always was, you teach the child at home, you do the curriculum yourself, you have this.
You make like a school at home.
Yeah, you make school at home at certain timings and stuff like that. That was my idea. So that's what I understood, where the parents are the teachers and so on. And then later on, I was introduced to the idea of unschooling and organic learning and all of these things. So that changed my mind as well. So it was more like, from being just because of religion or because of religious things, it was more than the concept. Like, what, we approve of this because it frees up the children, gives them creativity. It's better for them. And of course,
it was basically a lot of conversations and a lot of like exploring different ideas. It wasn't like a one-day decision. Okay, let's homeschool and that's it. Like,
And
a lot of people are wondering how to get started.
Well, the funny part, even at that time, the biggest thing was when you mentioned to someone about homeschooling. Like I said, in North America, it's a known concept. Somebody may have heard of somebody teaching, or doing homeschooling at home, or they may know somebody. So it's not like as strange as it sounds elsewhere in other parts of the world. Especially, this is why we talk about almost 25 years ago.
Yeah.
If you talk about Europe and other places, Middle East at that time, there was, I don't know if there were any homeschoolers, especially Middle East. So at that time, it was always the biggest drawback for that. I mean, not for us, but it was like the people like, what about the social life? What about the social part for the children? What about their buddies and their peers and so on and so forth?
Or how are they going to go to university one day? Like, that's a big one as well, right?
Well,
So,
for us, it was always like, well, hold on a second. We don't even have children. If Allah is going to give us children. I mean, university is very far off.
mm. So
We're
we were
more
kind of
concerned.
taking it 1 year at a time, like,
We're
just kind
concerned
of.
about, grade school and stuff. And me coming from Europe, I mean, we both have background in Europe and in Bosnia and stuff like that. And studying in Canada and US, the schooling is a bit easier, I would say,
Mm,
but I think it's better quality in a sense because whatever you learn, you remember. It's like the
mm,
way you learn, it's a little bit, how can I say, take it easy.
mm.
And meanwhile, in Europe, it was like just memorize stuff,
Yeah, it
rota
was more like
learning,
the
whatever.
Eastern European kind of learning,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like a lot of
And just
memorization, a lot
memorize,
of rules.
memorize, memorize, and know for that course to pass. And then later on, you might not remember half of it or even
Mm.
20% of it.
So how did
So
your educational experience shape the idea about homeschooling? Like, were you happy the way you were educated?
no, I was not happy. I mean, I was always the outgoing type. I was an extrovert, still am. There was no problem for me adapting to whatever school I was in. So I went to different schools in different languages, different countries. So there
Like
was
due
never
to
an
our
issue.
circumstances, yeah, because of the war.
Yeah, but my problem with the schooling was that other people dictated what school I'd go to.
Mm.
So that was
Decision was
always
taken out of your hand.
yeah. So like when I was grade 8, and this is back in 1992, the war's about to start, and they had a new thing that they even though I was the third best in the class, I was a grade A student, but in grade school, and the teachers decided because of their opinion that I would not be qualifying for gymnasium high school. For those of you who know about European system, gymnasium is like the generic, albeit 4-year high school
But
where it
it's like the
prepares you
university prep.
academically. Yes, that makes you prepares you for university. There are other schools that prepare for university as well, like economics high school, like the one they recommended me for, which was like the traffic law or something like that. I don't know how do you translate that, like.
Mm.
And then even though you could qualify for university from that school, but your chances are a little less because the courses you're taking is not as it doesn't prepare you as well as the gymnasium does. And I was a
So
bit upset
basically,
about that.
the choice is made for you when you're about like 13, 14, right? And I mean, and it's taken out of your hands. You don't have any autonomy about deciding what you want to do, right? They decide.
Yes, they decided because they said, Almir's got talent, but he's not a hard. He doesn't like to study too much. I was always playful. I like to, I
Talk.
I studied, but it wasn't like I was glued to books.
Mm.
And it was more like I love to enjoy, going playing. But of course, I had good grades. I was not like a straight A student. I did have like a B from math, for example, in physics. But on the other side of every other subject I did well, except in arts, for example, was another one. I hated it.
Mm.
And that was the one that kind of pushed me away from schooling because they made it a compulsory course for you to take, and it's all subjective. The way they grade you is subjective. There's no like
Mm.
metric that you learn about something. If they say let's talk about Renaissance, let's talk about uh, certain painters and know their histories and stuff, like, no, it was not about that. I would learn that and I would get a good
Okay.
grade. But it was like, why don't you draw stuff? And I'll give you a grade because how you draw. And I'm like,
Mm. Yeah, a
some
lot of
people just
judgment, right?
yeah, some people are not just good, you know. So
Yeah.
I had almost like a C most of the time, and then at the end I would get like a B
Mm.
in painting and arts, and I hated it. And I'm like, why should people tell me about subjects that really not going to benefit me at all, and I'm not going to be a painter or a sculptor or whatever.
Yeah, you wanted to
So
pick something that you're good at, that you enjoy. So I think our educational experiences shape how we look at homeschooling, right? Like, how wherever we
and
came
then
from.
and
So
then
when parents want to,
coming to high school, living in a refugee camp, um, you were given a choice to go, and I qualified to go to gymnasium, but they wouldn't let me. This was in Slovenia. They said, no, 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 this is for Slovenian citizens. You are a refugee, you don't qualify for that school because we're going to take a place from a Slovenian student. So what you can do is we'll give you, I said, let me do economics. Nope, no space there either. You're not going to take Slovenian students' place. What we'll do is we'll put you in a mechanical engineering high school. And me being a math, I don't like math. I can do quick math, but I'm not a math guy per se, calculus and all of that. And I'm like, you're going to put me in that school? You know why they put me and other Bosnian students in that school? Because they had space, because the Slovenian students hated the school. There were supposed to be 25 kids in class or 28. There were like 17 kids. So they put 3 or 4 of us in the class. And still, they had room. So I was in that high school
So I
for
think
like
a lot
years.
of your educational experiences were shaped by that idea of you couldn't choose, you didn't have a choice, the decision was made for you. I was a little bit on the opposite end spectrum. I was also in Germany myself, but I happened to just be in the right place at the right time. So I qualified for the university prep track, because they didn't really know what to do with me. So I went to the, university prep school. But at the same time, I wanted to pursue my own interests. So like in my afternoons, I would study languages and I would take extra courses and things like that. So I think both of us had that in common, that we both wanted to learn things. And to this day, we're still interested in learning things, but we don't want to be told what to do. We don't want to be
another
told
thing
what to
is,
learn.
but another thing was like, I'll give you an example. Like I learned, we studied Russian in grade school. And that was like a must for us back in Bosnia. I never used it. I know how to read Russian. Probably I will learn. I know how to talk a little bit, but I mean, it's useless right now. I've talked to 3 people in my life in Russian to hold a conversation. And then we moved to Slovenia because of the war, and we lived there. And of course, I had no exposure to English except through some movies and stuff like that. And guess what? I learned English on my own.
Yeah.
I did not learn it in high school. Basically, I
So
just
you
started.
unschooled yourself, basically.
Yes,
And that
yes.
also matched
I
my
learned,
experience.
and because I was an extrovert, I was not shy. And in the beginning, the people would come visit the refugee camp back in 1992 to 93. And they would say like, they would say certain things, and I would know maybe 10 or 15 words in English. So it was a lot of, I don't understand. I understand, you understand, I go, you go, come, go, stuff like that, right? So get out, all those simple words. And then I would just add on and add on, and there's a lot of my peers, a lot of my, friends in the refugee camp, they would be laughing because I sounded funny. I'm sure. I wish I had a recording of how I sounded. But then day by day, we used to have all these charity organizations coming to visit us. We were the exhibition for that city, refugee camp, people living in close quarters and stuff like that. People were kicked out and some of their family members were killed and so on, and, hurt and whatnot. And then I would be like tacking on English every day. So basically, in that 5 or 6 months, I was having conversations in English. And then I was the official translator for the refugee camp.
So you explained learning perfectly well. Like you have to not be afraid to make mistakes, right? Put yourself out there. And this is kind of how organic learning works. When you're in school, you get punished for making a mistake. You get a bad grade, right? Like if you don't do it perfectly, this is why kids shy away from speaking out in class, because somebody will laugh. They will get a bad grade if they fail a test. And so mistakes are being punished, right? And so when you actually learn at home or when you unschool, you kind of embrace failure, right? Like, as same like a baby learns how to walk and they keep falling and then they get up and then they learn. So you had that kind of in your background as well. So I think that maybe made us more open towards this kind of unschooling journey. So for the audience who doesn't really know, we have 6 children, alhamdulillah. So how did this whole idea about a big family come about? Like, because that's kind of the thing that goes hand in hand with homeschooling. When people hear how many kids we have and that they're all not in school.
Well, I always loved children. I mean, I was the oldest grandchild in our family, and back home we all lived in one area. There was 4 houses, 4 uncles, including my father. So he had 3 brothers and him, and then grandparents. So I was the oldest grandchild. So now you can think of that I would get my grandkids. I mean, you could say my cousins, right? Grandkids, my grandfather. and they were younger than me. So when they were born, I would be playing with them. I would be babysitting them. I'd be involved. I love that.
Mm.
I had cousins that were 9, 10, 11 years younger than me. So when I was like 10 years old, I used to be playing and babysitting. I would
Mm.
be with the 6 month
So
old. I
you
learned
love
how to.
children, right? And I think this is something
Absolutely.
we talked about, before we got married, like this whole idea about having a large family, that we both love children and that we wanted to have a lot of children. Like it didn't just, of course we were making dua, and this is by Allah's permission, we're able to have this large family, but this was kind of our idea, because I think a lot of people don't have these conversations when they're about to get married. They don't talk about these
Well,
kind of things.
we that was the first thing we talked about. How serious are you about getting married? Because we didn't want to do non-Sharia ways. And
Mm.
honestly speaking, I did speak to some other sisters about marriage, and one of the sisters, she was like, "Well, I'd like to get married, but I want to finish my education. I have my university in front of me, 3 years left, 4 years left, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Listen, I'm serious. We need to get married within the next 5 to 6 months, right? I mean, make a plan, have an idea." And I'm like, there was other things about children and all those, and she was like, not gonna happen. And then I'm like, I cut it off. So this is how Islamically should be. You talk about ideas, and but with you being how we met, it was like right off the bat we clicked. So
Mm.
it was not like dragging on like it was dragging with the other sister. And it
Mm.
was like, trying to convince her. She tried to convince me, and I was like, it's not working out. You just leave it so it doesn't get out of hand, and that's it. So, but with you, it clicked, and then we just worked on it every day. We talked about so many things. I mean, we talked a lot, right?
Mm. Yeah,
We
so I think people always ask, because I think when I get questions about homeschooling, it's like people are always like, well, how did you bring up this idea to your husband? Or how do you have this conversation? Or maybe the husband has this idea and he doesn't know how to present it to the wife. But there's a lot of talking, and we discussed so many things before we even got married, just to make sure we're on the same page regarding all these things, right? And so one of the things was like
yeah.
wanting to have a large family. And then I think one of the questions, that people asking, like, how do you divide labor and how do you divide parenting? And this is something we discussed before we even got married. This is something, where you made it clear that you really love kids and that you're interested in having a large family.
And
And
I,
I'm
I was
on board.
asked. I was asked. To me, it was a simple question. Uh, would you be able to like help around with the kids when they're small, like change
Mm.
diapers, this and that? I was like, that was a non-issue for me. It was okay because I've
Mm.
seen my father always be, look, my father was, away, like he was working in another country, and he'd come home every 2 weeks, a month. So he was gone a lot. But whenever he was at home, he was involved. He was doing things. And my mom always says that, that's how he was, and that's how he is. And him actually, I seeing him that he loves cooking, that he actually cooks for the family, and
Mm.
that other men do make fun of him. But I always understood that that's not a weakness. That is something that he enjoys, and let him do it.
Yeah,
So
and
my
it's
mom
something
was
that
like,
benefits the family. Like he loves serving his family, subhanAllah. Like, everybody appreciates all of us, even his daughter-in-laws and his
"Oh,
grandchildren.
that's his love language. He
Yeah,
will
subhanAllah.
not say to me, I love you, son." I mean, he does once in a while, but he would be more like, "Oh, you're coming to visit. I have special turkey waiting for you. I'm gonna grill it, and I'm gonna make it with special sauce. And it's very tasty, by the way. And I eat it, and I say, Baba, this is great. This is amazing taste. May Allah reward you." And then his face, the smile that in Bosnia we like to say, his teeth, they melted, right?
Yeah, he's happy. So you grew up with an involved father, right? And even
Yes.
though he wasn't there, even though he was working abroad, you had a very traditional sort of upbringing, due to the economic situation in Bosnia. He was working abroad, he wasn't home much, but when he was present, right? The same thing for me. I grew up with a father. I'm the youngest of three, and so by the time I was born, my parents' marriage was already stable, and they had figured out all their things, and all. So I was kind of, a latecomer to the family. So my father was also involved. He would pick me up. We would do things together. So I think maybe that shaped idea about genders, in terms of marriage, right? And so I remember one of the first pictures you sent me, because we met online back in 1999. One of the pictures was were you holding babies, like various babies.
Oh yeah, yeah. That summer I was working for the city, and there was a summer job, and there was actually one particular child, subhanallah. He was born in 97. So at that time he was maybe almost 2 or a year and a half, or I would say maybe end of 97, beginning of 98. And I was actually the one who was invited by the family to give the azan, and kind of welcome him to the family and this and that. And it was aqiqah and everything we did, subhanallah. And that kid, mashallah, today is a very practicing brother.
Yeah,
And I'm
mashallah,
so
Allah
glad to see
barik.
that. But anyway, I would hold him, I would go on a break because I was roaming around the city all over the place with a truck. And then I would stop by, and there's a few Bosnian families in the city, and one of them was one of the, this elderly ladies who would babysit him, by the way, because the mother was working. The mother and the father were working, and the elderly lady, and the Bosnian lady, she would be taking care of it, and I'll stop by and say salam to her, and her husband was also around and see him as well, and then the baby, would hold, and there was a picture that was taken. That was funny.
So I kind of had an idea before I even got married to you that you're somebody, who places high value in a family life, right? And I think that's important. I think that's what doesn't get discussed, because a lot of people talk about just, about men as providers, like in terms of like, okay, they're going to go work and make money, but they're not providing any emotional security for the family. They're not providing any education, any upbringing, for their children. So I think we kind of cleared it. And I think that's important to discuss that before marriage. So we wanted to have a large family. We have 6 kids, alhamdulillah. So how does the division of labor go between us? Like a lot of people are asking, how are we managing? So you are obviously the one who is providing financially, like you're working, and I'm home. But so how else are you involved in our family life?
Well, I do take care of kids. I take them out, do things with them. Since I'd worked a regular Tom and Joe and Harry job that people work, they go to work from 9 to 5. For me, it's just a little bit earlier than that. So 7 to 3. So, I come home. Yes, I am tired sometimes. So I do take a nap, and then I would, after work, spend time with them, albeit it's not a lot of time. That time that I do spend with them, it's on the weekends. And on weekdays, on certain days, I don't take naps. And then I would be playing with them, doing things, ask them what they want to do. And, it would be, the terms is being abused a lot, like quality time. Quality time, it's like, yeah, it's quality time. Sometimes it's really not a lot of time, but yeah, it does to be quality. Just reconnect with the children, ask them how they're doing, let them sit in your lap. Talk to them, interact with them, give them a hug, see, because
Play
they want to
games.
bond with you. Yeah, of course, play games. Yes, of course, play
I think a
games.
lot of parents, they want their kids to meet them in their own world, but we got to go into their world, and playing is their world, right? So we got to meet them where they're at. They're always happy, as soon as you say you guys want to play a game, right away they're coming up and
Yeah.
wanting to be involved. So in terms of the division of labor, yes, I am the one who is at home the most of the time, right? But then you come in and you help. I appreciate your support in other ways, where you're encouraging me, where you kind of tell me to take a break, where you tell me, hey, why don't you go do something for yourself? So I think that's important, because I think a lot of men think just because women are home, that's their default place to be, and that they don't need any breaks, that they don't need any. They almost like make fun of them,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
what is
of
this
course. Yeah,
self-care thing all about, right?
a lot of times in the weekend, if I'm, around, I would be taking the kids myself somewhere. And this is not just taking the kids who were, older. Now they're older. So
Yeah.
it's, in a way, it's easier. But I would take the kids who are younger than that. The only ones I would not be taking is the ones who are breastfeeding, right, at that time. But even if they're towards the late stage breastfeeding, like, when they're 2 years or so, I would still take them for a few hours, here and there, and play with them, be whatever, make it a trip just to give you a break. And then eventually I did take the kids, and I'm still taking the kids days at a time, right, by myself. A lot of people, they say, how do you manage? How do you do it? But, it's just one of those things that you get used to it. There's a certain routine. and you get the older kids to help you as well. So it's like a whole family affair. So
Mm. So I think a lot of moms feel sort of overwhelmed, when it's time to do like a family outing, because if they've been already with the kids the whole week, they don't really feel like going out again with them. They'd rather stay home. So I think this is what I often do. You guys will do something without me, where I'm just happy to be at home and have some quiet time for myself. And I think the trips you've been taking are really important, like, even trips to say family or to spend a couple more days together. Because that gives you a chance to see them, for longer periods of time, gets you a chance to like be involved with,
yeah, I would take them
bedtime
to
and
for maybe.
showers and meals and
Oh yeah. Well, I was the shower guy. I would shower them, right? That was my thing. And the kids, one of the things they love the hose offs.
yeah.
So I
When
would
they would
put
come
them,
back, from the playground or something, if they would be like, dirty or something, that would be like hose off time.
yeah, I put them in the tub and I apply high pressure, with shataf, with the, so they love that, just, oh, Baba is hosing us off. So yeah, that was my thing that I used to do. And right now, like I said, they're older, so no need for that. They're doing their own showers. But many a times I would be taking the kids for overnight trips, sometimes 2 or 3 days at a time, be it visiting family, do something else, take them even for like overseas trip, and you staying alone for a few days. That's okay too, because everybody needs to
So
recharge.
how do you deal with the comments? Because I think a lot of men don't feel comfortable doing that. Like, how do you deal with the questions where people ask you, "But where's your wife? Why is she not coming?" Like, because
I
it's not
I I,
typical, right?
I'm being honest with them. I'm being honest with them, and I'm like, yeah, she needs a break, and
Mm.
she has a
You
break,
guys were
and
just on a trip, I think, you guys were on a trip about a month ago, not like 3 weeks ago. And I think everybody was asking, where's your wife? Where's your wife? But then one of the brothers, like I think by day 4, he said to you, I think I know why your wife needed a break, because he saw
yeah,
the
because
kids
you
at
have to
home.
think like the kids are at home 24 hours, and then you get to talk to them all the time, and we
Mm.
have open relationship with them. We let them ask us anything. Of course, there's certain times for, conversations that are very serious, certain times that are, more relaxed conversations. But at the same time, we do talk to them at all times. And the kids, when you have that door that's open like that, they feel free and they want to talk. So we don't shush our kids and we say, oh, we do tell them maybe now it's not the time. Can we discuss it later and stuff like that? But we don't like make them feel bad or make them feel down by not talking or not opening up.
And that takes a
So
lot of energy, right? Like that takes a lot
yes,
of
yes.
energy
So
being
now the kid,
present.
when we went to the trip when I went to the trip with four of the girls, we went and then they would be having the same energy and same communication. They were like talking a lot, and then some of those of my friends who were there, they were like, okay, now we understand why the wife needed a break. So that was kind of funny because, you know, there's a
And
lot
I
of.
think that's the part. I think a lot of men don't know what's going on at home, right? They're not involved with their kids. They don't understand how much energy it takes. One of the first experiences, I think, where you and me switched roles in a little way was, when our oldest was about 2 years old. And I was finishing up my degree. I was finishing my clinical practical skills. And then you were kind of staying home with him for a little bit. And for me, that was kind of I felt, how it is to be outside the home for 12 hours a day. And I think you saw how mind numbing it can be to be home with a toddler, right?
Well, we had a purpose, we had a goal that we wanted to achieve, and it was a limited time. So it was like we were supposed to stay there for 3 months. We ended up staying slightly less than that, 2.5 months, and I was at home with Abdullah at the whole time.
You were the stay-at-home dad.
Yeah, yeah. And it was, and he was breastfeeding, right? So
Yeah.
it was not easy for you. It was not easy for me at the same time, but I think it was difficult for him in the beginning. And
Mm.
he was, he's an introverted type of a child. So I would take him on a break when you had a break at we were studying midwifery and stuff like that for those people who don't know,
Mm.
working in an all-woman center, delivering babies and help deliver babies and with the pregnant woman and so on. So it was like, the halal environment, everything. And this was something that we thought this will benefit the Muslims, right? Because at that time there were not many midwives, especially
Mm.
Muslim midwives. And there was an option for our sisters to have that opportunity to have that care, and at the same time have a halal job. And so I was, doing that, and then I would bring Abdullah, and you would breastfeed him, and would go back and stuff like that. Funny part about all of that is that we realized, yes, he missed you, he loves you, and all of that. But I did not realize how much we bonded.
Mm.
That he bonded so much because I was the one that was go-to person for him at all times. And he, when we got back from that place, remember, and then we went back to Canada, and we were at home in our house back in Canada. And now you did your, your practicals, your clinicals, and all of that. And now it was time for me to go back to work. And I
Mm.
would go back to work and be missing me a lot. And he was like, it took him, well, he got used to it quite quickly. But I mean, it was the first few days he was missing me a lot. And he was like, so I was like, in a way, like the mother, like he
Yeah.
was.
Well, you experienced what it is to spend a lot of time with a child, right? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of men don't have that opportunity. Like, they shy away from actually spending time with their kids and bonding with them, right?
Now, the funny
But
part is,
even
of course, he was a year and a half. He doesn't remember any of it. And he was very, very
well, you
close to
set
it.
that foundation when they were little, right? But I think you've continued to spend that time with them, over field trips, over vacations, these kind of things. I mean, just recently, with Haroon, like, when he was about to graduate high school, you went to Medina with him, and, it was just a trip with two of you guys, right? And so I think this is one of those things, like, where you have to spend time with somebody to build a relationship, right? Like, you cannot have a relationship with
Yeah,
somebody
I
if you
mean,
don't spend the time
I
with
would
them.
I would take them for trips for a week here and there. I remember maybe like 8 years ago, I took four of them. At that time, we had five children. You had a little one, she was
Mm.
breastfeeding, could take her. I took four kids for 2 weeks by myself.
Mm.
And it was okay. And then it was a break for you in a way. But at the same time, as visiting family, it was okay. And then, occasionally I would do that. And, subhanAllah, one thing you realize when you take the kids, and not taking kids away from the mother, but you spending time with them, they actually bond with you more. And then
Mm.
you have that special bond with them that, that is good because you get to see them one on one, And the youngest one, when we were just traveling now, we came back, we took 2 rooms in a guest house, and we had to separate so that all the girls were in one room and the youngest one was with me. So I called them my roommate. So even today, there's a joke, hey, my roommate,
Mm.
what's up, and stuff like that. And, she'd be like, a smile on her face. She's so happy because we bonded. And she's like, when are we going to do it again? When are we going to be roommates again? And so on. So that special bond and relationship, stays with them. And
Yeah,
that's
and it
what,
and it comes from, like, spending time with them. So what would you say to all these guys who are telling their wives, well, it's your job to parent the kids. I just go to work and I provide for the family, and this is
you
your
have to,
job.
you have to be involved. You have to be involved. Like I said, if you cannot be involved time-wise a lot, at least do something. Do something
Mm.
meaningful. You'll be surprised. Just 1 hour on a weekend, take the kids out yourself.
Mm.
This is gonna be great for them.
And when we say
They're
here
gonna
take
remember
out,
it.
like, we don't mean take them to expensive outings,
No, no, no.
malls
What
and
I mean,
stuff.
take
We
out,
just
for
mean, like,
example.
spend that time together,
No,
right?
no,
I think
no.
it's
Take them
important to
out. Take them
clarify,
out. I
right?
mean, when I
Sometimes
say
you just
take
go
them
to the
out,
park
take them.
together.
Yes, I mean take them out from the house. So
Yeah.
go for a walk. Do something fun that you're not spending any money. Go to the desert. You know,
Yeah.
a little field trip, whatever. Something so small, simple, where you're gonna spend a few bucks here and there. Nothing,
Yes.
nothing major.
So
We're not
the
talking
key is,
about.
like, in the spending the time together, and then you doing it as a father with them. Whereas I think when the couples go together, a lot of the labor ends up being with the mom,
I
right? And the
mean,
dad is
I
kind of,
mean, even what surprises me the most is like some of the things you do over the years, and you think that something that you did, particular event or particular thing you did, you think that that should stick in their minds more than others. But no, it's something that you thought it was very small, right? yet they remember it the most.
I
And
remember asking our girls, what was the most memorable thing in the last couple of years? And we did all these cool adventures, right? And then one of them, she says, "Oh, remember when we went grocery shopping with Baba?" So, like, you never know. It's about building that relationship with
I mean,
them.
I took them many places, but we would go back to my village where I'm from, and we went to the forest once, just took a walk, and then I discussed with them, like, watch the step there. There's a little water there, and there's some frogs, and there's some animals, this and that. And it was a hot day, and we ended up spending like an hour there. And then, because of such a unique time for that walk or whatever it was, I don't know, the kids talk about it even 2 3 years later, and I'm like, really? That was like such a minor thing, taking your kids to your village forest, I mean, next to your house, maybe a few hundred yards away. And they talk about it even to this day. Oh, remember when we went there and we skipped over this little creek, and then we went there, we saw these frogs, and
So a lot of
just
it's about
something.
just making memories and just like spending time together, right? And I think that's where it kind of starts. So you're saying, even for example, though your dad worked abroad and he wasn't always there, it's not necessarily like, that you have to spend the same amount of hours as the mother who is there, the primary teacher maybe, but that you just make an effort to spend some regular time with them, right? And for
Yes,
me,
of
to be
course.
honest, that gives me a break to just kind of, unwind, because I hear them talking whole day long and I do all these kind of things with them all the time. So that gives me a break, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on family outings and these kind of things. I prefer than the alone time, so that has balanced us. You don't do any teaching officially, because a lot of people are asking who teaches the kids. I don't do any teaching either. So how does that work?
Yeah.
Like, because I think people asking, are you involved in the homeschooling? Not really. Like, you finance us. Like, I always say thank you for your support, right? You finance our projects in terms of like, what we want to do. I run it by you. I say, okay, look, there's some cool books we want to order, or this is this project we're doing, these kind of things. But you're not teaching them, except just discussing things and taking them on
Yeah,
really
when
good
they ask
adventures.
questions, we discuss, we talk about certain things, and we go on these, conversations. And then, but the funny part about homeschooling is just organic. It's just it happens on its own. Just like recently, I mean, we never told them, but they decided to study uh, different languages, each one of them. That was kind of strange, because they're like, talking to each other, but in the languages each other they don't understand.
Each one picked a different language. Yeah, they didn't want to pick
Yeah,
the same language.
yeah. So that was like, but you know what? They're going with it, and on this particular app, like Pimsleur, or you can go with Babbel or whatever app is. I mean, you're spending what, $20 a month, $15 a month, US, for example, or whatever. It's not a lot. People talk about homeschooling and cost, and all these 4 children are learning 4 or 5 different languages. I mean, that is cool at schooling at its best, in a way. Yeah, of course, you need to learn the language from someone, right? I mean, in this particular, it's an app, the program and whatnot. But I mean, our oldest daughter, she learned mostly from there, right? And then
Yeah,
YouTube
she learned
videos.
German independently.
Yeah,
Yeah, she
yeah, yeah,
talked
yeah.
about it in her. So a lot of our kids are just kind of pursuing their own interests. Like, it's really very
And that's
open.
the, and
So
that's
we're
the
not
fun
doing a
part.
lot of teaching, like kind of in a sit
But
down,
that's the fun
let's
part,
do
that you go
school.
back to, what I didn't like about my schooling was that they forced onto me things that I didn't like. That mechanical engineering high school that I went to, I never really touched some of those subjects again.
Hmm.
Like, I haven't seen or done those formulas since that time, particular subjects that I was learning. I really didn't enjoy it, and I never went back to it. So, but the stuff I do enjoy, I'm still doing it nowadays. So the kids, the same thing with homeschooling is, if they love something and they're gonna do it, you don't have to ask them, push them, schedule it for them. It'll be
Yeah, they're
it'll be
gonna
done on
figure
their
out a
own.
way to do it. Yeah, we see it with reading and with writing if they
Yeah,
really
you're
care
there
about
to
it.
help them, like counsel them in a sense, guide them. If they're maybe,
Provide the
they need
resources.
resources. Yes, yes, if they need resources, you do that. And like I said, it doesn't have to be expensive nowadays. Like, I have these, because I do some teaching at work. I do medical education for some of the physicians and nurses and other healthcare professionals. And I see these young students, they're in their early 20s. And when I say students, they're medical students and maybe some residents. And I'm like looking at that and I'm like, man, I'm jealous of you. And they're like, why are you jealous of me or us or whatever? I'm like, you have those iPads, you have notability apps, you have those Apple Pens, and you have tablets or Samsung or whatever. And I said, learning is so much fun for you guys. I'm like, you can find so many things, interesting things on one little tablet, and you can like, highlight and I have a
It's never been
horrible hand.
easier. It's never been
Yes,
easier.
and I have a horrible handwriting, and even my kids sometimes they're like, Baba, but your handwriting is not really nice. I'm like, it's okay. But sometimes they try to give me a compliment. Uh, so anyway, I was telling them like, even if your handwriting is horrible, you can have the application recognize what you're writing and type it out for you. I'm like, I'm so jealous of you because I remember when I wanted to learn some stuff, the fun stuff, I had to get certain books, I had to get the notebooks, I had to write stuff down. I mean, back back in Eastern European schooling, one day a week in our Bosnian language at that time, it was dictation. What the heck is dictation? Well, it was exactly what it was. They would dictate things for a whole 45 minutes and you have to write down. And that's how you learn how to write quick.
Mm.
But it
And
was like at the end of that, it was your hand was hurting. It was not fun. And this is not how you learn. So I don't even know what they dictated. I don't remember nowadays.
yeah, you just
But
remember hating it, right? So I think a
yes,
lot of it's about the kids just pursuing what they love and what they enjoy. Now, this is where the question comes, well, how are they ever going to get a job, or how are they ever, how you make sure they know what they're doing? And I think a lot of husbands maybe might be afraid, because they're the providers and they had to be pushed, to get a certain degree. I think we discussed this with Harun. Harun was saying how a lot of the Muslim boys are just doing, the safe careers. They're doing medical school, engineering, these kind of things. So I think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of those colonized mindset that there's only one way to succeed. So how do you feel about our kids? Like, are they going to have a future? Like, what's going to happen with them?
yes, inshallah. We try to direct them if they ask us, we give them our opinions, but at the same time, we want them to enjoy and study what they enjoy and hopefully give them practical advice. What's going to get them a job? Of course, we try to be, pragmatic about it. It's not like, look, I love history and geography. Even nowadays, I'm I could say a nerd when it comes to geography or history. When I was grade 1 or grade 2, I knew all the capitals of all countries in the world when I was like 7 or 8, and I knew all the countries. But realizing that later on, that studying that in university is not going to get me a job. I kept it as a hobby, right? I still love watching videos, learning, and reading about Wikipedia and stuff like that, all those articles. But that would not get me a job. So we try to do the same thing with our children. Be pragmatic, try to direct them in a way that something that will get them a job. But at the same time, if they really love something, keep it as a hobby, to keep that
And I
on the
think this
side.
stuff comes, when they're much older, when they're high school age, when they're young, they don't need that kind of pressure, right? They
No,
just
no,
need
when
to
they're
learn.
young, let them just explore all kinds of stuff. Of course, we, as Muslims, we have certain things that we do not appreciate that they're studying or that they're looking into it. We tell them that, we teach them about that, we talk about it, and they understand. But other than that, the door is open. I mean,
Has there been a time where you felt like really uncomfortable with homeschooling, or you felt like you were second guessing it, or you thought it
yeah,
was
of
a bad
course. I mean,
idea?
you always, yeah, I second guess myself. Oh, how is our son going to be? Because he was like, in grade school, not a big deal. High school was a little bit more challenging, I would say, because there were certain subjects um, that I was not able to teach him or you. So we had to do some online courses, which I think, that's totally fine because they have to be familiar with
Yeah, we
subjects.
outsourced some of those things in the high
Yes,
school. We're
yes,
talking here grade 11 and 12.
yes, yes. And, but there are only a few courses here and there. But anyway, so the worry was like, how is he going to fit in university once he graduates and all of that? And he was accepted to university, and then you're worried about that. And then the first half of the semester comes by, and he did the midterms, and he's like, he did good, and I'm like, oh wow, mashallah. Then you're like trying to tell yourself it's working.
Yeah.
You're questioning yourself: is this really working? Is this what it is? Because a lot of times you ask yourself, like, these kids, they were not spending 6 hours a day in classroom like they usually do. in a regular school. They were studying maybe an hour a day, but that hour a day or 2 hours, that was really like intense in a way that they were really focused and everything was just sinking in. And then everything else they did was a part of the learning process.
And the
So
playing is so important for the brain in general, and just real life learning. I think that has shown us, over the years, like that, all that has contributed to their success, in the academic sense at the end of the day. I talked about writing a lot, like, our son, I mean, I think there was years and years where he didn't really produce anything written until he had something to say. And, now he's a TA for his English course, right? Because now he cares about it, right? So I think it's all comes from that internal motivation rather than, push from the outside. So I think it requires just a lot of trust. And we didn't really know any homeschoolers while we were doing this. So it was a lot of just conversations between me and you, bouncing off ideas.
yeah.
There was a question that always comes up, what if we disagreed? What if the husband and wife are not on the same page? Like, was there a time where me and you disagreed how to handle things, or how does that happen?
Yeah, there was some disagreement about, certain subjects and certain things, of course, but we worked through it, and we discussed it, and we said, you know what, we cannot do this for him, and we have to go this way and stuff like that. So there was some disagreement. I don't know if there was really like disagreement per se, that you went like this when I went 180 from you, or vice versa. It was more like doubt about, is this
Mm,
gonna work?
mm.
How is it gonna be? And then once the ice was broken with Abdullah, and then he became like a very good student, and mashallah, and then we're like, okay, this works. That was like,
So that was like 12 years of holding our breath. How is it going to be? Okay, let me just kind of backtrack, because I think it's related as well with homeschooling, like in terms of our parenting styles, because I think, there was maybe a lot of judgment from people around us that we were doing things differently, and we didn't really care about it, right? We did things our own way. But I think a lot of people feel the pressure, like, for example, if their parents are telling them to do certain ways, or their neighbors or their extended family, right? How did we handle that? Like, did we like let other people be involved, or like what did we do? We just did our own thing.
we didn't care.
Yeah. So I think it's important to just kind of be on the same page, like the husband and wife
You you
agreement,
you
right?
you have to stand your ground and go on. And there's a lot of naysayers, right? And but at the same time, you have to be humble, right? So
Mm.
at the end of the day, yes, Abdullah is mashallah, he's doing well. Harun's doing well. So at the end of the day, you don't go and say, I told you it's gonna work out, this and that. This is the part of the shaitan plays tricks with you. You still say humble, say alhamdulillah. You just kind of like, Abdullah now. I don't think he told his classmates that he was homeschooled, right? It's one of the things we always,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
because
So I think, and I think
there's a
every
stigma.
child has
There's a
been
certain
different.
stigma. Hmm?
And I think every child has been also different, right? So we've been kind of learning with
If
them.
anybody would tell me, 25 years ago, that of the 6 children, it would be like 6 different tribes, I would not have believed that person. I would be like, but they come from the same family, same 2 parents, grew up in the same house. They have the same things that are exposed to, but guess what? All 6 of them are different in their own way. And like
Mm.
literally they're like 6 tribes. And as if these 6 tribes are like related by blood when they were living in different parts of the world. That's how different they are.
Yes, and they're all in
So
the same house. So there comes a question, how do we make sure we have enough energy and enough time for that? I think maybe me and you generally are more high energy than other people. Like, how would you
yeah.
say, I think it has to do with our personal energy, right? That we just kind of, and I don't think everybody has to have 6 children that they're going to homeschool and travel the world with, right? I think you have to sort of look at your own personal energy, how much you can handle. And I think that's the part of like, you shouldn't let other people dictate, how you do things. Like, I think a lot of people end up being stuck, in other people's clothes, like, trying to do what other people tell them. You have to kind of find your own voice. And I think the husband and the wife need to be that same team, not one versus the other, but rather be on the same page and kind of keep discussing it and keep saying, hey, I don't like this. What do you think about this? And, we had to go through our own process, where I would complain about something and you would try to fix it for me immediately. And I would be like, I don't want fixing. I just want to vent. I just want to complain.
Because a man or a guy in the house, he's a fixer, right? He hears things, he wants to have solutions. And
So I
this
would
is
have a
the
bad day, I would have a bad day and I would say, oh my God, the kids have been like this, loud, noisy, whatever. And then you were like, oh, but did you try this? And let's do
But
that.
this is a part of the marriage learning. I seriously did not know what to do. I'm like, I'm hearing all these things, issues, problems, and I'm like, oh, I gotta do something about it. Let me fix it. Let me do this. Let me offer this. Let me do that. And sometimes when you don't have a solution, you kind of hunker down and you're just quiet and you're like thinking about it, and then you'll be like, but you're not. You'll be like, you're not listening. I'm like, yeah, I'm listening, but I don't have a solution for what you're saying. They're like, no, I just don't want a solution. I just want to talk about it. So that took a while. I mean, this is part of a marriage and normal life and roles
Mm.
understanding. And this is where these roles are, uh, intermingled. And when I say, look, if somebody looks from outside at us and they will say, but Almir is doing stuff you know that his wife does. Like, we have, like, I'm doing your job or you're doing my job or whatever. But
Mm.
no, it's not like that. When I talk about roles, there are those roles that a man has and a woman has. So we're not, like, for example, venting and these things, that women do more than I like to vent too. And you know what? Nowadays, when we do that, I announce like vent incoming.
Yeah.
So there is
So
no,
because I would do the same thing, I would feel bad and I would try to fix it for you. So, you'd be telling me about work and I'd be like, but have you tried talking to him or have you tried saying this? And you'll be like, can I just finish my sentence? Can I just tell you what happened at work?
yeah.
So we
So
have to
that's
kind of learn
that's
how to communicate with each other, but again, being on the same side. I think a lot of people, there was a question, from my mom's group, they were asking, how do you make a marriage work for this many years with this many kids, because I think a lot of people just sort of settle. A lot of people just kind of give up. I don't know, like we've been married now 24 years, alhamdulillah, and the kids are, ranging from like 7.5 till 22, right? So we have a whole range, some of them are married, some of them are engaged, right? So any words of advice? I don't know how long we've been talking, so I think maybe we can finish it off with that.
any
Like
words
how
of
do you,
advice.
yeah, like, I mean, how do you make a marriage work with all
I'm
these
gonna
factors?
I'm gonna announce a joke. Joke
Okay,
incoming.
joking coming. Okay.
Happy wife, happy life.
Oh.
No,
Okay.
no, it's not that. It's I think what we decided, even, well, coming back to that summer of 1999, or I would say spring of 99, because we did talk about, you know, pre-marriage. We did talk a lot for almost 5 months, right?
Hmm.
And there was no phones at that time. It was very expensive. There was no internet in a sense that you would have video calls like this.
Yeah, we would just text,
It
basically. It
was a
was
lot
like
of text, a
texting.
lot of texting.
A
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of
It was
text.
on a desktop, not even on a phone.
Yeah.
It was on a desktop computer, right? So there
ICQ
was,
for those old timers.
yes, yes. So what we did was we always said, and you know what? Funny part was there were some disagreements at that
Hmm.
time between us, but we said to each other, we said, let not these disagreements linger on. Let's not let the day go by before, either one of us apologizing to the other, or rehashing it or talking about it in a sense that, have some sense to make some sense of it. And that's what one thing we did, that whatever argument we had, and every marriage has arguments. Let's not sugarcoat it. This happens to
Mm.
everybody. But let not those arguments turn into a day or two or three or four or five.
Let's not turn them into resentments, right? Like if
Yeah.
it hasn't been
Let
resolved.
let them let them, definitely you get an argument, give space, leave the room, you leave the room, she leaves the room, you know what I'm saying? So at the same time, but come back, calm down, and then talk about it and discuss it. And yeah, there have been sometimes, you get an argument and maybe you sleep it off next day, and then but the next afternoon we're all back to where we were before. And
I
then
find
maybe
it
you'll
really
send,
hard to, I think being mad takes a lot of energy, right? Like, holding
yes,
that
you would send me
grudge.
a message
Holding
or
that
I'd send you
grudge
a
is
message. There
so
would be a
basically
message
like
sent.
just reconnecting, like always that bid toward turning towards each other, like trying to reconnect, I think
Because
that's
in
key.
all honesty, I've seen failed marriages. I've seen close to me. When I say to me, alhamdulillah,
Well,
my
we're
parents
both
were like
involved in the community. We're both involved in
yeah,
the
but
community,
I
so
mean,
we see.
family wise, I mean,
Mm,
relatives,
mm,
close relatives, you could say, without mentioning which one, names and stuff like
mm.
that. Close relatives, I've seen marriages fall apart, and I've seen other marriages stay, they're married, but there were a lot of fights where maybe not physical fights, okay,
Mm.
but where, the wife would leave the husband because what he did to her, and you know what, she was in a way right to do what, in certain times what she did. She would just go to her parents for like 2 weeks, a week, 10 days. And I was like, always like, that's not how I want to deal with the situation in my life. That, I make my wife upset that she would do that, or I do something like so unreasonable that she would do that. And, so we decided that we would fix the problems right away before they get to be bigger. But talking about it before marriage and rehashing and having a plan of how to deal with it, that helped a lot. So,
I think that's like really, really crucial. I mean, just kind of that picking the right person,
and you know
and
what
again,
else is
sometimes
funny?
Allah
Like people
tests you
ask
with
me,
these kind
look,
of things. But I think
if you
most
find your,
Muslim marriages are not really most people don't have enough conversation pre-marriage.
no, no, I'll tell you
They're
something.
just marrying basic strangers.
What the problem is, a lot of people ask me, I'd like to marry a wife that has the same interest like I do. I'm like, buddy, your marriage is not gonna last. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if you marry somebody who's 100% like you, it's not gonna work out. What I mean, same interest. For example, let me clarify what I'm trying to say. If your interests are matching when it comes to raising children, outlook on life, on all of those major things, definitely go for that. This is a must. You have to agree on those things. But
Mm.
if it comes to like certain interests that you love more, for example, I love sports,
Watching
right?
sports.
I like watching sports, reading about sports, because that was like a diversion always of the injustice that you see in the world, right? It was, and I would be like talking about to my friends about certain, highlight I saw, whatever, and you would be totally ignorant about it, and it's totally fine. I never forced it upon you. Oh, you should learn this, and it's okay, and it's totally fine.
We have a
And
lot
there's
of
certain,
separate interests. I think, no
and there's
matter
a
how
lot of
much we do.
interest that you have that I have no clue about. Maybe
Mm.
you told me some stuff about it, but I am not really immersed into it that I would know a lot, and that's totally fine. And and you know, two people in marriage need that. You need your interest to be for you and her interest to be for her.
Yeah,
So
we need
meaning
like our
that
own separate space, so to speak. Yeah, like to be our own separate person. I think what I've seen in the community is that a lot of women kind of give up on their own interest just for the sake of marriage, for the sake of family, and then they kind of lose themselves, and then they're resentful. And then the husbands are just kind of judging their interests and things like that. We kind of left it to each other. Like we spend a lot of time together, but then again, also a lot of time apart, which I think is also important. Like, that you have
yeah, we
time
did
for you
spend a
to
lot of time
pursue.
apart because being married, you know, because we do travel and you had your family to in Bosnia and I had my family in Canada, and there would be a lot of times, and we counted, like, didn't we just like out of the 24 years we've been married, we did spend almost 2 years apart, right?
Probably more by this point,
More
like
than that.
maybe three.
More.
I mean, not
Yeah,
at
that's
once, but like, months at a time, we would
so
be.
when people say, well, you don't really understand how it's to be apart, but buddy, I do understand. We understand.
Mm.
Um, not easy, but something to deal with, and you try to minimize that time apart. So if you have to choose, if you have an option to have that time apart, make it less. Make
Mm.
it less,
But
and
I think it's also important to be able to function on your own as your own person, right? Like, so that you're not totally lost without, I mean, from outside, people see us and they might see like, okay, we have all these children and the kids are not going to school and we're spending so much time together. But at the same time, we also have a lot of our own projects. We're both involved in the community. You run your thing, I do my own thing. It doesn't always overlap. Sometimes we do things together, but then a lot of times, my thing is on the other side and your thing is over there. And so I think that's really important, that we kind of pursue and then there's no insecurity about it, that there's no like,
And you
oh my
have
gosh, what
to,
is she doing
if the
and what is he
things,
doing?
and if the things the husband is doing is halal and the wife what she's doing is halal, we should not prevent each other from stopping each other from doing that, especially the husband, stopping his wife if something is allowed for her to do and she enjoys, makes her happy, why not allow it?
Yeah.
If there's something dubious about it, haram, definitely. Yes, that's a no-no. There shouldn't be a discussion, right?
Yeah,
We
but
have
I
that,
think that comes,
we have
when
that
both
trust.
people, I think, when you married me and I married you, we both kind of assumed that the other person knows their deen, that the other person is confident in their ability to handle themselves, right? Like, it's not like, you need supervision or I need supervision. We both fear Allah, right? So we kind of know our own limits, in an interaction and in our activities and these kind of things, right? So I think that allows us that freedom that we can kind of, I mean, obviously we check in all the time with each other. What are we up to? What are we doing? But I think that independence within a relationship is also important, right? And so especially when we have all the kids and we're all together all the time, right? So it's
And
kind of a,
one thing the kids always make a comment. The kids, I don't care whose kids they are, they will try to play games. Will try to get something out of the mother, out of you, and they couldn't get it. And they would come to me, try to do the same thing without mentioning that they actually talked to you about it already.
they're
And I
trying
would
to
be
push
like,
boundaries. Yeah.
yes. And then I would be like, give them the same answer like you. And they're like, and we didn't even know that we didn't talk about it because they would do this, that without us actually having a chance to have a discussion about it.
Mm.
And then they're like, oh, you guys are the same. How come always like this? So that was the funny part. So they always like, you guys are always like on the same page. And I think that's very important for a couple to work out that they are on the same page in a lot of times when it comes to raising children. Uh, you know,
All
we
hands
always
on
joke
deck.
about,
I think I'm going to use a sports analogy, right? Because I think we were talking about that. When we had one kid, it was like both of us, focused on. When we had two kids, it was like, okay, you take one, I take another one, right? But now there's more of them than us, right? There's 6 of them and there's only 2 of us. So we kind of gotta, hold the defense, right?
well, how about this for all the guys out there? I'm alone at home and there are 5 girls.
Now there's 5 females at home, right? So you're
Yeah.
suffering, right?
Yeah.
The boys have left. I think it's also important to keep a sense of humor in all this, right? To crack jokes, to kind of make fun of ourselves, to not take ourselves too seriously, to
Yes,
not
it's very
consider
important.
like this whole parental respect, like such a huge thing. I think people put respect where love should be. Like love should come first, and just being kind to your kids
I
and
mean,
just
even
loving
like
them.
our daughter-in-law, you know, the pressure was for her from a lot of her family members saying like, you should call, me being her father-in-law, call him dad, or call you
Mm.
mom, or
Like a lot of
auntie. I
cultural
don't know,
stuff,
some
right?
some kind of like thing. And I'm like, no, you can call me by my name, please. She actually asked us, how do I call you? What do I? I'm like, how do you call me? You say Almir. That's how you call me.
But I think that's exactly what it is, though. Just a lot of conversations about like, okay, what do you expect and what are your expectations? And to be honest, this is all a learning experience for us too, because we did not necessarily grow up like this. We tried to learn from our experiences. We tried to, process whatever happened to us as kids. I think we're maybe trying to heal ourselves in the process as well. By parenting our children, we're trying to do better. We're trying to do better than what we had, and that's not in any way
Because
to blame our parents. Our parents did the best they could. They really did the best
if
they
you
could,
of course, but if
but
you
we're
project
trying to kind of make
fear,
a
if
difference.
you project fear into kids that they should fear you, then yeah, they will fear you when they're in front of you. But when they're not around you, they're not gonna have that same fear and that same
Mm.
respect. And meanwhile, you want to have that when you're not with them. So you want to have your kids talk about you in good terms. Of course, we should obey our parents and stuff like that, but let's be real. If you are not a good parent to your child, it's not going to reflect good upon you
I
when they are
think
growing.
that's really important, that it's actually Islamically, it's the obligation of the parent first to be good to their child. Like that's like the right
Because
of the child is,
because
that
a
we
parent
take
is
care
the
of
adult.
them.
The parent is the adult in the room. not the child.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we expect the children to be already adults. And we just,
And
then
to
we discussed,
respect and to love and to obey without actually having been given the tools and
then
the
we just
skills how to
discussed
do
this
that.
like yesterday or before yesterday, where you said that there was some conversation between the girls and you. I was not there, I was at work, I think. And then you said like, well, the discussions went so many different ways, and it was like really like a bit annoying from the questions they were asking. And then you kind of realized, well, hold on a second. The prefrontal cortex did not develop yet. They're still children. They don't understand what they're saying yet. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. You have to be the adult in the room and go from there. Because if you take it for what it's worth, you might get upset. And of
And that's
course,
not to say that we never get upset. We get triggered plenty of times, like, particularly if something comes up that we didn't have growing up, right? And then you see the kids and they're pushing your boundaries and you're like, man, look at these children. They're doing stuff you were never allowed to do. And you kind of expect that gratitude from them and these kind of things. But those are our triggers to manage. That's not their responsibility, right? Like we have to learn and we have to, I think a lot of times comes up that parents are saying the kids are not behaving. Like the kids are not behaving, the kids are not listening, and then the parent starts yelling, the parent starts beating them, the parents start punishing them. I think the grown-up here is not behaving. Like the grown-up doesn't know how to control themselves, right? And this stuff didn't really come. I mean, yes, there was this desire and love for kids, but we didn't really know how to do this. Like, so we were learning as, the last 25 years, and we're still learning. We're still trying, to get help when we need help. To kind of consult with each other, to consult with other learned people, to consult with other professionals if necessary, like if we need help. So I think it's not just the fact that you give birth to a kid and then all of a sudden you're this parent who knows everything and who doesn't need to change
you
anything.
learn on the fly. You learn on the fly.
You learn and you have to keep learning and you have to keep adjusting. And I think to me, what's really amazing is, for example, your parents, how much they have changed in a great way over the years, right? And I think, through parenting our kids and then even your parents giving us the space to be the parents, we wanted to be, giving us that freedom.
Yeah, of
They
course,
have
every
changed.
parent,
They have
our
changed. They
parents,
have
your
also
parents, and my
become
parents,
different.
they had input in how we parent our children. And then we would, gently tell them, excuse us, we have this, we're doing this. When you explain our way, and you know what, to their own, benefit and understanding, actually, it was good that they were listening, and then they say, oh wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
And they really respected our boundaries. I must say that, like,
I
maybe
mean,
it was
look, I
difficult for
mean,
them. It was not easy.
we have to say our parents did what they did best, and because of the work that they put in, that we are privileged more than they ever were, and that we have to count for that, because my dad had to go work just to provide daily bread, and he had to go to another country, and my mom was doing farm work
And a
and
lot
sending me to
more as a
school.
daughter-in-law than I ever
Yeah,
had to, right?
yeah, and then I, so that she would not parent me much, I was raised in, when I was young, by the community. She was there for sure. I'm not saying that she was not there, because she was there all the time, but she was busy with other things. And, that being said, we are privileged in a way that we have this opportunity, that, I had opportunity to get educated. And this was a great thing, because my mom, she was a super bright girl. And that everybody says that. I mean, this is not her saying that. This is people in the village. They say she was the best of her generation. And she went to high school to another city, which is 25 kilometers away. And she was going to go to high school, and she was very good, but she had to be living, in an apartment she was renting from somebody. And this person was abusive, not abusive. Um, he didn't do any abuse, but he was like, more like words, like you
It
have
was
to do.
difficult. It was a
It was
difficult.
difficult. So she left. She couldn't finish her education. And even to this day, she's very sharp. She understands things. She learns things. She speaks very good English. Being an immigrant and everything. And she basically, believe it or not, she, even without that schooling that she has, she had one
She
grade of high school.
unschooled herself.
Yeah, even with that, she was an
She has been
accountant for.
tremendously successful, mashallah.
Yeah, she was an accountant for a grocery store. Taking care of the books. Can you imagine that? Like, she has no formal schooling, and she was taking care of the books. that she was taking
Well, that
better care
shows
of the
you
books.
that formal schooling is, questionable, right?
But I mean, that being said, she was not privileged to get to the level that we got when it comes to education, when it comes to being able to. So we're privileged a lot, so that then our kids are even privileged more because of that, subhanallah. And this is, by the
Well,
way,
I
so
think
Allah.
it's, I think we talk a lot about nowadays about the trauma, we inherited from our families and from our cultures and these kind of things. But I think it's also important to point out how many good things we inherited, that we stand on their shoulders. The fact that my grandfather chose to educate my mom back in the 60s, where she was the only one. Similar story to yours. My mom was one of the first ones to attend school and to get an education. That has made all the difference, right? So we have inherited a lot of good things from our elders. And I think then, when the pushback comes, when we're trying to do something new, they were really open enough to give us that space to do things our own way.
If you look at
They
it this way,
respected that, and it was not easy conversation. I'm sure it must have been weird for them when we said, we don't want to send our kids to school.
me and my brother being the first ones to have university degrees in our family, extended family, that was a big deal. So now, subhanallah, like it's a given for our children to have it, because it's just that they have the opportunity. And you know living in a place that you have to go to university 300 kilometers away, and living, now you go to university next door.
Or you can do it
Yeah, so
online.
you do it online. So I mean, this is the privilege that we do have nowadays, and a lot of people do. So
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I think a lot of times when the conversation comes up between the different generations, when maybe new couples want to homeschool or when they want to parent their kids differently, I think it's important to have that conversation, that we appreciate what our elders have done for us. And then we're not necessarily criticizing what they've done. They did the best they could, but we're just trying to do better because we now have better resources, right? And then our children have already surpassed us, like mashallah, Allahumma barik. They have already different blueprint in their minds. They are way more emotionally intelligent than we are, and they're able to handle things differently. And that's something, that's, I think, one of the most revolutionary things you can do is take charge of educating your own family and putting that tarbiyah in your own home. Subhanallah, I don't think anything changes the world as much as changing your family does. Like, I wanted, growing up, I was that idealistic teenager who wanted to change the world. You can't change the world, right? You got to start in your own house.
I mean, think about it. Like you have to look. I remember sitting with students of big scholar, right, and asking them a question. This was the students of one of the major ulama. They were his students, and I sat down with them. They were visiting Canada at that time, and they were coming from Middle East. And I asked them. I said, "What do you think of we want to move to Middle East, right? We always had that idea." And at that time, I was like in between degrees. I was finding my own way. Did not finish yet, and I was just like, trying to see what I would enjoy more and stuff like that. That being said, you were studying to be a midwife, right? And you were halfway through. And the question I popped to the shuyukh, I said, would it be okay for us to move to the Middle East, and I would be staying at home and you'd be working, right?
Because it
As a
seemed like
midwife.
at that time that, my job was going to get us there. Yeah.
Yeah, in halal, of course, environment, working with women only and so on. And the sheikh, subhanallah, actually three of them were sitting together without any hesitation. He said, of course, there's nothing wrong in Islam about this. Of course, you, as a man, you should be the one providing, you should try. But I'm like, this would be a temporary thing until I find my way, until, finish my education and so on. He's like, yes, please, go do it. And then, subhanAllah, what happened? We had a second child, Harun. And then the things kind of changed. And then we realized, and you realize yourself, that you being at home is more important
than my career, right?
Yeah. I mean, you remember saying that, like, we see the children losing their way a little bit, even though they were young, especially the oldest one, Abdullah, when he
No,
was
but
3 years old.
I really wanted to always be active in the community. And, and I knew, like, my career was going to take a big hit if I stay home, right? But somebody needs to be at home. Somebody needs to be at home. Like, and I say here, somebody very vaguely, but, the kid cannot be raised, just like that. And if you put that effort into the raising of children at home, subhanallah, this is how you change society. And I see this now, like, with our 6 children, sometimes the kids are joking, like, you guys are creating a cult, like, you guys are cult leaders or something. But I mean, subhanallah, you can really change the blueprint of the next generation. And, now our boys are getting married and they're, establishing their own families. And subhanallah, it's been a joy to watch, how they're approaching marriage, how they're approaching their lives, and our girls. And I'm excited to see that. And so it's not easy, but if anybody else tells you, okay, this is how you change the world and this is where your sadaqah jariyah is, no, it's within your family. And this is, where you put your energy into your kids, and you have that big vision. I remember asking same thing, when the kids were little, because, I wanted to volunteer in Somaliland, at the clinic there. And I had all these big dreams as a midwife, and now I'm going to have these birthing centers around the world and all these kind of things. And I remember asking one of the speakers, how am I going to manage that? Because I was telling him, my oldest is 6 and I'm pregnant with my 3rd, and I'm going to be breastfeeding, and I want to homeschool and I want to change the world. How am I going to do all that? Right. And he just kind of said, like, well, take it one day at a time and focus on your family first. Right. And subhanallah, look at, I have always found ways to be involved in the community. I have always found ways to give back, but the priority has been the family. And and I think the husband and the wife being on the same page, because I think nowadays there's so much discussion between feminists and alpha bros and the whole these kind of movements, and everybody is against each other. But I think everybody forgets that men and women are protectors of one another, and this should be a conversation about how to protect families from both sides. Our daughters and our sons, they need their father as much as they need their mother. And so it's not like one or the other, right? It's a healthy family that's important, right? And if a woman is mistreated in the family home, the kids will pick up on that, and they will pick up on the marriage, and they will pick up on the dynamics and these kind of things. So I think it's important to just kind of set a good foundation, and then you can kind of continue.
Same thing goes with if
talking...
the husband is mistreated in the same way. So
yes, for sure. For sure. Equal opportunity, right? So, well, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. We could talk more, and we do talk all the time anyways, as it is, but this is just
do
not...
I send you the invoice, or you?
No, we'll build the kids. We'll say this is family time. This was family time. I think, let's see how the response is. Maybe we'll come back with another topic. This was really unscripted. I don't think we just went kind of off tangent. I hope this is enjoyable for somebody to listen. Sometimes those podcasts are the best. I enjoy hearing from real people. Like, I enjoy hearing other people's experiences. So hopefully this can be helpful to somebody. And do let us know in the comments if you have any questions or any feedback. Did you appreciate this kind of conversation or not? And we'll be back again with one of the older kids, or maybe you again, inshallah.
Maybe as a family.
Oh, we'll have to figure out the technology, how to do that, inshallah. Maybe we'll bring back everybody, inshallah. All right. Thank you so much. And inshallah, we'll talk again soon. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.